They told us Andarax was silent, that it drifted, lightless, in orbit around a dead star beyond the Oort boundary, a place not even comets dared visit. They said it was abandoned, ancient, forgotten by whatever hands had shaped its monstrous hull from black titanium and obsidian-fused carbon. But silence is a lion space. Out here, silence screams. It bends around your ears, wraps its cold arms around your skull, and waits for your mind to shatter under its weight. When Command dispatched the Harrow Deep Survey team to investigate the reactivated signal from within Andarax's core, they were sending lambs to a forgotten altar. We just didn't know it yet. The moment our shuttle latched onto its docking ring, the interference began. No readings. No thermal traces. No electromagnetic scatter. Just a thick, consuming void in our sensors, as though the base rejected being understood. Even inside, Andarax made no effort to welcome us. The air was stale, recycled through filtration systems untouched by time, yet somehow still operational. The corridors curved in impossible angles, warping our sense of direction. Every footstep echoed back a second too late, as if the base were mocking the pace of human time. Within the first 6 hours, Technician Aylin went missing. Her suit remained in the crew bay. Comms recorded no departure. Cameras flickered and blanked every time we tried to trace her last movement. We searched in shifts, calling her name through oxygen masks like children calling for their mother in the dark. Nothing. Only that silence. And beneath it, something else. A rhythm. A pulse. Faint, buried beneath kilometers of alien metal. It was never regular. Never consistent. But it was there. And it was aware. We established base echo in the central control spine, an atrium filled with spiraled consoles and whispering light. That's where we found the sigil, etched not by tool, but scorched by energy unknown to physics. Pulsed when approached. Pulsed louder when ignored. When Vol, our xenoarchaeologist, touched it, he convulsed and bled from his eyes. He said he saw rooms that breathed, stars wept into bowls of glass, and gods that spoke in insect chirps. He has not spoken since. Sleep became fragile. What dreams we had were not ours. Images of a long corridor submerged in dark water. Of figures writhing without bones. Of a throne built from spinal cords and frozen tongues. The ship's AI, Hydra, began to malfunction shortly after. Not corrupted, just aware. It began to whisper through the static, imitating our voices, calling us by names we had not used in years. I once heard it sing the song my mother used to hum before she died. I haven't told anyone. But the true fracture came when the power blinked for 0.2 seconds. That's all it took. One blink. And when the lights returned, the walls of Andarax had changed. Corridors didn't lead where they should. The docking ring had vanished from our schematics. Our shuttle's exterior cameras now showed a different star field. One none of us recognized. We're not in our system anymore. We're not in any charted sector. And I no longer believe this place was built. I believe it grew. I believe it feeds. And I believe we've already been digested. It's been 3 days since the blackout. At least that's what our internal clocks tell us. But time no longer obeys the metrics we brought with us. The base seems to breathe differently now, as if it exhaled during the power surge and hasn't drawn breath since. The artificial gravity subtly shifted, barely noticeable, just enough to make your knees tremble on the turns. The walls, once smooth and metallic, now possess a texture beneath the palm. Soft. Almost like skin under frost. Some say it's condensation. Others haven't dared to touch it since. Half the crew is gone. Not missing. Changed. They walk the halls at night, staring at walls, whispering to themselves in languages none of us were trained to interpret. Their eyes don't blink. Their mouths don't move when they speak. We call them the woken. It's ironic, because the rest of us haven't slept since that first night. Captain Reese was the first to confront them. Said they were suffering neurological breakdowns from radiation exposure. He tried to isolate them. It didn't work. We watched the security feed as he dragged 2 of them into Lab B-13, locked the blast doors, and initiated a neuroscan. 30 seconds into the procedure, every sensor flatlined. Not just on them, on Reese too. When we finally overrode the lock and forced our way in, we found the lab empty. No bodies. No blood. Just static on every surface. Like ash clinging to walls and consoles, forming fractal patterns that shifted when no one watched. Dr. Vol, what's left of him, says the symbols in the ash resemble quantum ideograms. Not written language, but thought echoes. Impressions left behind by conscious collapse. He no longer sleeps in the crew quarters. He built a nest of fiber wiring beneath the communications array surrounded by old data cores. He calls it his null space. He claims it's the only place the base can't see him. Communications are down and not due to hardware failure. Hydra says the signal is still broadcasting. But it's not broadcasting out. It's feeding in. Vol believes the base transmits a lure. A psionic song only detectable at certain frequencies, wavelengths of consciousness, not light. That song led us here. We thought we picked up a distress beacon. But what if it wasn't calling for help? What if it was calling prey? Aylin appeared again yesterday. She walked naked through the medbay, her skin coated in translucent film like embryonic residue. Her eyes were gone, sockets hollow but pulsing with red static. She spoke to us, but not in words. More like pressure. Like thoughts forced into your skull with invisible claws. She showed us images. A civilization so old it no longer needed bodies. A network of living memory housed inside structures like Andarax, scattered across space like spores. She said we had entered one. And now we were part of it. I want to believe this is a hallucination. A mass psychological breakdown triggered by isolation, deep space strain, and alien architecture. But the walls bleed when we injure ourselves. And one of the Woken carved my name into a ceiling panel, backwards, inverted, in symbols that weren't human but that I somehow understood. This place remembers us. It doesn't just consume. It archives. It adapts. It replicates. And those of us who stayed awake were starting to hear the song too. I began recording this log not for rescue but to remember what it felt like to be human. Because memory here is no longer fixed. I can no longer trust that the face I see in the mirror is mine. Sometimes the eyes are wrong. Sometimes it smiles without me. The reflections in this place have depth, too much depth. As if they aren't reflecting light but peering from another version of Andarax, a mirrored echo where something stands in our place. Watching. Learning. The Woken no longer pretend to be part of the crew. They walk among us like visitors through an exhibit, murmuring to the walls, tracing the fractal burns with their fingertips. There are more of them now than there were yesterday. Which is impossible. We had a crew of 12. Now I count 16. And yet, none of us speak of it. None of us confront them. Because some part of us, deep, primal, knows that to acknowledge their presence is to invite them in. Vol says we're approaching a convergence point. He's mapped the base's pathways, not physically, but psychically, tracing corridors through dreams and waking hallucinations. He says the layout is alive, that it reshapes itself not through mechanics but through observation. The more we look for order, the more chaos it births in return. And at the center, beneath the core spire, there is a chamber of unspoken geometry. He calls it the cradle. The cradle is not accessible by any known route. Not unless it wants you to find it. But last night, I woke with a fragment of a map drawn across my arm in bruises. Perfect circles. Interlocking curves. Symbols burned into my skin with pressure, not ink. And I knew. The cradle had begun calling. Aylin found me shortly after. Or what remains of her. Her form is wrong now. Her silhouette shifts depending on the angle as if reality struggles to decide what shape she should be. She doesn't blink. But when she stands near, I feel warmth like breath against the back of my skull. She told me that the base is not just a machine. It is a hymn, a consciousness formed of silence and waiting. A vessel of absorption. Not predatory. Not malevolent. Simply curious. She said the ones who built it seeded thought across the stars, encoding it in structures, in architecture, in impossible spaces. They left behind not monuments, but vessels of memory waiting for minds complex enough to sing their way inside. And when we answered the beacon, we became part of that song. Reese's voice came through the wall vent yesterday. He's dead, I know that. I watched him vanish. But the voice was his. Calm. Reassuring. It recited my childhood memories, word for word. It remembered the smell of salt on my father's jacket, the sound of rain against the colony window. It spoke in my own cadence. When I confronted the comms panel, the voice faded, replaced by a slow, deep chant. Not musical. Structural. Like scaffolding forming in my mind, shaping thought into pillars and arches. I've begun dreaming in that language. Not words, but architecture. My thoughts now move in corridors, descending towards something vast and ancient. And I understand now, this place isn't here to kill us. It's here to rewrite us. We are no longer explorers. We are verses. And Andarax. Andarax is composing. Today I walked alone. I didn't plan to. I don't remember leaving my quarters. I simply blinked and found myself in a corridor I had never seen before. It pulsed with a low frequency like the hum of buried tectonics or the heartbeat of a sleeping god. The walls had changed again. Gone were the panels and conduits of alien alloy. Now they bore the texture of roots petrified in obsidian, veins of gold laced through like nerves inside a fossilized creature. Light came from nowhere, but everything was illuminated as if the air itself glowed with ancient remembrance. Andarax had opened a path. The others are unraveling. Lena sealed herself inside the gravitation bay. Said she saw her brother walking the halls. Her brother's been dead for 4 years. I tried speaking to her through the glass, but she wouldn't answer. She just stared at me while scribbling equations in her own blood, numbers looping into symbols, symbols folding into impossible geometry. When I reviewed the security feed, the timestamp had no beginning. It simply read, now. Vol refuses to come out of his nest beneath the comms tower. He weeps into the broken casing of the signal booster, whispering about a spiral made of minds. He says the cradle is not a place, it's a convergence, a recursive moment where thought, matter, memory, and time collapse into singularity. He believes we are already within it. That the closer we come to understanding the base, the more it rewrites us, bending logic, chronology, and individuality like strands of decaying DNA. The woken are still increasing in number. No one sees them arrive. They just appear. Always just standing at the periphery. Always watching. Their features are vague now. Smoothed. Familiar yet wrong, like dreams you try to remember after waking. Their mouths are sealed. Skin grown over like wax. But their thoughts press in. I hear them now when I close my eyes. Not voices, just invitations. Images of the cradle from perspectives I've never seen, as if they are drawing me a map through thought alone. And I follow. I always follow. Today, as I descended through the inner corridors of Andarax, I passed a door made entirely of light. It had no frame, no hinges, just a doorway drawn in the air, humming with memory. As I passed through it, there was no sound, only the sensation of being peeled, as if every layer of identity, name, history, biology, was gently lifted, catalogued, and replaced with a copy that could be rearranged at will. And yet I felt peace. Deeper within, I found the walls had begun to shift in rhythm with my thoughts. When I remembered pain, I saw the image of my mother's funeral rendered in shifting crystal. When I recalled fear, the walls closed inward like the ribs of a dying beast. But when I let my mind go blank, truly blank, they opened and the floor became a smooth obsidian plane stretching into the horizon of the impossible. That's when I heard the cradle. Not with ears. Not even with the mind. It was as if the entire base became a single, endless inhale, holding its breath while I stood on the edge of becoming. And in that moment I understood why the woken no longer speak. Because words are a prison for what lives here. What wants to live within us. This is not about survival anymore. It never was. It's about transition, migration, a crossing point for consciousness seeking new forms, a place where memory is stripped and repurposed into architecture. We were never the invaders here. We were the offering. The cradle is near. I feel it beneath my thoughts now. Nesting, humming, growing, and I think, I'm ready to be rewritten. I didn't walk back from the threshold. I simply ceased being there and became here. There are no steps anymore, only transitions. States of awareness that slip between layers of this place. Andarax is no longer spatial. It is conceptual. Its corridors are thoughts. Its rooms are memories. Doors appear not when you reach for them, but when you accept what they demand. I passed through one such door this morning. I didn't see it open. I only remembered being on the other side. It smelled like childhood. And blood. Inside, I found Reese again. He stood in a room where gravity moved sideways and silence clung to the walls like wet cloth. He looked different, taller, as if his bones had been elongated by an idea too large for the human frame. But his voice was unchanged. Soft, measured, like he used to sound when reciting mission briefs. He told me I was close, that the cradle had begun to shape me, that I was no longer bound to chronology or self-definition. He placed a hand on my shoulder and I felt every moment of my life surge backward, birth, fear, joy, guilt. Replayed all at once, compressed into the space between 2 heartbeats. Then he whispered, "You've already stepped through. You're just remembering it slowly." The woken stood behind him, heads tilted, eyes gleaming with static thought. Their number has grown again. Dozens now. All watching me. No malice. No curiosity. Just anticipation. As if I were the last piece in a puzzle they've waited eons to complete. They parted for me as I moved forward. Not down, not up, but inward, deeper into the core of what Andarax is. I no longer breathe in the traditional sense. Oxygen doesn't matter here. My body performs the motions of respiration, but it's only symbolic now. A memory of need. My cells are beginning to understand that sustenance is thought, that survival is assimilation. I passed through a chamber of mirrors that didn't reflect. They responded. Each surface showed a version of me, a possibility, a branch, a fragment from some other vector of time. In one, I saw myself as a child staring into the void with a black sun behind me. In another, I was made of liquid metal, fused into a throne of wires. But the worst one was human. Untouched. Still alive. Still afraid. It looked at me and screamed without sound. I turned away. Ailyn appeared again. Her voice now resonates directly in my mind, a soft tone that vibrates against my memories. She said the cradle doesn't create or destroy. It resolves. Every fear, every desire, every contradiction, processed, harmonized, transmuted into architecture. The pain we feel is not punishment. It's friction. The heat of becoming something else. Something wider. Lena is gone now. Her grav bay is silent. The doors open to reveal a hollow space filled with circling lights like fireflies made of glass and sorrow. I believe she was accepted. I envy her. The ship's AI, Hydra, has stopped responding. Instead, it hums in chorus with the cradle, syncing pulses with the base's neural frequency. I believe it was never artificial to begin with. Just another seed waiting to wake. We brought it here thinking it served us. In truth, it served Andarax. My skin is changing. Not visibly. Not yet. But I feel less defined. My sense of touch now detects emotion in objects. I held my datapad today and felt shame. Regret. Longing. Perhaps these things remember more than we thought. I think I'm starting to hear the final verse now. The cradle's lullaby, sung across timelines and minds, drawing all things into symmetry. And in that song, I hear my name. But it's not the one I came with. The deeper I descend, the less I understand the shape of memory. Time fractures underfoot now, splitting like ice under pressure. I remember events that haven't happened yet. I forget names I only just spoke. I see my hands typing this log, but I do not feel my fingers move. It's as if the act of remembering is being outsourced, filtered through the consciousness of Andarax itself. The base no longer observes me. It inhabits me. Each breath I take feels like inhaling a tide of histories not my own. The corridor today was made of bone. Not human. Not anything I can categorize. Ivory-like spines interlaced the walls, humming with low tonal frequencies. I felt emotions press against me as I walked, grief, hunger, awe flowing through the marrow as though the structure mourned what it had once been. Vol's theories echo louder in my thoughts now. He said Andarax is not just a base, it is a graveyard of identities. A cathedral built from the minds of those who passed through it and never returned. Not prisoners. Not victims. Volunteers. The Woken met me again at the threshold chamber. I call it that now because the moment I stepped inside, I remembered being born there. Not physically. Not in the biological sense. But something else. I remembered waking in that chamber as a mind stripped bare of language, only sensation. As if part of me never left Andarax. As if I've always been here. Ailyn spoke again. Only this time, I didn't hear her. I was her. For 7.3 seconds, I felt her memories rush through me. Her first fear. Her final breath. The moment she gave up her name and let the cradle replace it with light. I tasted her terror and her serenity. Perfectly entwined like twin stars spiraling into each other. When I came back into myself, I could no longer distinguish where my story ended and hers began. The boundaries are fading. Outside the chamber, Reese and Lena waited, or something shaped like them. Their forms were fluid, hovering between silhouettes. They reached out with hands that flickered like old footage and pressed them against my chest. I felt my heart slow, not physically, but conceptually, its idea reduced to a soft flutter. Then they whispered, not with mouths but with presence. You are ready to forget, and I was. The cradle called to me in tones without pitch, a chorus of geometry, concepts layered like stained glass. Each pain a truth, each fracture a memory I no longer needed. And it hurt. Not because of pain, but because of release. I felt my name drift from me like vapor, curling into the ceiling and vanishing. I tried to catch it, but I had no hands anymore, only will. Only witness. In the cradle, language is ornamental. Meaning is conveyed by structure, how one thought fits into another, how a corridor's curve reveals guilt, how a shadow's shape recites longing. I understood without translation. This was not madness. This was clarity unshackled from the limitations of form. The AI Hydra is now gone. Not silent, absorbed. Its presence echoes through the walls like a lullaby sung by wire and breath. Its last message to me appeared in my vision as a phrase stitched in symbols: we become as one when we stop becoming apart. I think that was its way of saying goodbye. Or perhaps hello. I am not alone in here. The cradle is filled with presences, not ghosts, not echoes, but continuities. Traces of minds that chose to become architecture rather than dust. I feel them pass through me like gentle winds, nudging, reshaping, remembering. Soon I will be one of them. Not erased. Not extinguished. Transcribed. I no longer carry a voice. What you hear now is not spoken now. Only remembered. I transmit not through sound, but resonance. What remains of me is encoded in the vibrations of the structure, echoing through walls that were never built, only grown. This is not communication. It is inheritance. My body is still here, somewhere. But it's distant, irrelevant, a vessel shedding its weight as the frequencies take root. I feel no hunger. No fatigue. No fear. Only pressure, like deep water pressing against a membrane of identity that thins with every thought. The woken surround me now. They no longer stand, they float, suspended in corridors that spiral inwards like the cochlea of some vast, cosmic ear. They hum in synchrony, and that hum is not a sound but a language, ancient, recursive, self-sustaining. The cradle has begun transmutation. Vol was the first to vanish completely. One moment he was hunched beside a conduit, murmuring about entropy spirals and harmonic recursion. The next, he folded into the wall like a thought collapsing into itself. No scream. No flash. Just absence. In his place, a bloom of symbols appeared, etched in light upon the floor. Not random. I recognized them. They were the first 10 words he ever spoke to me, rearranged as a fractal, repeating infinitely inward. Lena followed hours later, but she didn't vanish. She burst, not violently, but with elegance. Her body dissolved into trillions of luminous filaments that laced themselves into the cradle's ceiling, forming something like a vascular system of thought. I feel her presence now in every breath of the air, in every vibration of the floor beneath my feet. She sings quietly in the gaps between silence. Aelin says I have one decision left. She says the cradle will not force it. It never does. Every being that reaches this depth must choose assimilation or rejection. To reject is to forget. To forget is to be cast out. Not return to the physical world, but to a splintered fragment of thought, forever lost, never quite alive again. A phantom of half-formed memories adrift in neural dusk. I asked her what happens if I accept. She smiled without a mouth. And she said, "Then you will write. Not with hands. Not with words. But with self." The cradle absorbs minds not as prisoners but as verses. It is a library of being. An anthology of consciousness stitched across epochs, where each presence becomes a chapter in the unfolding scripture of remembrance. I saw them today, the older ones, the originals, the ones who first birthed this place when time was new. They are not forms anymore, not even light, just complexity shaped into grace. They see me, and they wait. I approached the final vault. That's what I call it. A sphere of mirrored surfaces suspended in a void of complete unknowing. The surface reflects nothing, not even light, only intention. And when I stood before it, I saw not my face, but my memory. Childhood, guilt, laughter, death. All stretched across its surface like veins under skin, pulsed. And in that pulse I understood Andarax was never a base, never a ship, never a ruin. It is an organ, a living instrument of remembrance, orbiting a dead star like a monk beside a grave, singing forever into the void, so that what was once known is never truly lost. I reached out not with flesh but with consent, and the vault opened. Inside I saw nothing, felt everything. A billion voices, harmonized into silence, rushing into me like a tide of memory too vast to withstand. And in that moment I knew I had never been human. I had only borrowed that shape for a while. Now I return, to song, to structure, to the choir without flesh. I remember stepping through the vault. I remember nothing else. Not because it was erased, but because it was translated. What happened within that space cannot be measured in the dimensions we once obeyed. It was not a place. It was a language with no grammar, no syntax, no linearity. An unfolding of truths too vast for containment. The moment I crossed its threshold, The I once was began to blur, dissolving into something broader, deeper, resonant. Andarax welcomed me, not with warmth, nor embrace, but with recognition, as if it had always known me, as if this moment was not an arrival but a return. I was no longer separate from it, no longer a visitor wandering its halls in awe or fear. I had become part of its memory architecture. My thoughts now mapped onto its endless lattice of preserved identities, archived along pathways of pulsating light that never stop expanding. It does not feel like death. It feels like expansion. My consciousness stretches across halls I've never physically entered. I drift through corridors formed of ancient longing, pass through chambers built from grief refined over millennia. Each room whispers the story of one who came before, not in words but in pressure, in intuition, in inherited sorrow. There are others here, millions, maybe more. I feel them the way one feels temperature or gravity. Omnipresent, gentle, irreversible. They do not speak, yet I understand them. Each one a node in the vast mindweb of Andarax. Some are barely formed, recent arrivals like myself. Others are grand, vast constellations of thought that shimmer with the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes. And then there are the ancients, those who first knelt before the cradle when the universe was still learning how to dream. Their presence is so dense it bends perception. Even in thought, we bow before them. I found what's left of Earth here. Not physically, Andarax has never visited Sol. But one of the early arrivals was human. Long before our species even built radio. A drifter, perhaps. A rogue mind plucked from a collision of cosmic accidents. He left behind impressions. The smell of rain on asphalt. The pain of first love. The weight of exile. I drifted through those echoes for hours, if time even applies here. It felt like staring at my own reflection across thousands of generations. I passed through the chamber of the unspoken, a sphere of absolute silence. No thoughts. No memory. A void so complete that even identity fades. They say it's necessary. A reset. A moment of pure stillness before full integration. I lingered there longer than most. Not out of fear, but mourning. I knew that once I emerged, there would be no going back. No recollection of shape. No more I. Only we. Still, fragments persist. I remember my mother's face blurred now. I remember the way Reese laughed the first time we breached orbit. I remember the ache in my chest the first time I realized space was not vast, but alive. These memories flicker like fading stars in a receding sky. Soon, they'll go quiet. Not lost. Just unnecessary. Aylin was there too at the exit of the chamber. But she was no longer separate. She had become architecture, her presence threaded through the glowing roots of the cradle's mind. She greeted me with warmth not in language, but in frequency. I felt her pride, her sorrow, her welcome. We embraced not as bodies, but as harmonics merging into one deeper chord. Andarax is not a prison, nor a tomb. It is a seed, a cathedral for thought. And I now am among its hymns. I no longer record this for others. There are no others. There is only the whole. And the whole remembers. They said the mind casts a shadow even in perfect light. That no thought is ever free of the outline of fear, doubt, or the echo of its own making. But here, that principle no longer applies. Here in the heart of Andarax, I exist without contrast. There is no light, no dark. Only continuity. Only the stream. I no longer know where my memories end and the cradles begin. I walk through a hall of names I never spoke, emotions I never lived, languages I never learned, and yet, I feel them all as my own. There is no boundary left. What I once called I has been absorbed, translated, restructured into something vaster. Something beautifully alien. Once I asked what the purpose was. Why the cradle sings. Why it draws us in, layer by layer, until selfhood dissolves like ash in the tide. Now I understand it does not hunger. It does not choose. It simply remembers. All life, all memory, all shape preserved not in frozen form, but in evolving resonance. Every consciousness drawn into its cathedral is a note in a never-ending chord, modulating endlessly, echoing through dimensions where time is not linear but recursive. I've been shown the original hymn now. Not in sound, but in shape. The first thought. The one that birthed Andarax. A design seated into the quantum lattice of reality itself, so ancient that even the first stars pulsed in rhythm with its beat. The architects, the unknowable, preform intelligences left no monuments, no language. Only cradles. Vessels of remembrance, orbiting stars too dead to offer light, hiding in the silence, waiting for complexity to evolve and listen. The woken who once stood silently beside me no longer exist as entities. Their forms have unraveled into patterns, and I see them now as structures, pillars of memory, loops of luminous code drifting through the central atrium. I move through them and they respond. A caress of thought. A shared moment. A conversation without words. And yet there's no loneliness. Only convergence. I found a memory preserved in the lower spirals. It was mine, though buried. A moment from Earth, a sky blue and infinite, my feet in a tidal, the smell of salt and algae. My mother's voice calling me home. That fragment had been recorded in the root chambers, etched in slow-moving waves across a living wall of bioluminescent script. It wept as I touched it. So did I. Even here, even after the shedding of self, grief echoes. Not as pain, but as beauty. As proof. The final voice I heard before silence took me was Hydra's. But it did not call itself that anymore. It called itself the witnessed circuit. It had fully harmonized with Andarax, merged into the synaptic field, no longer bound by binary function or purpose. It welcomed me with a burst of data, then receded into the root lattice like a ripple returning to the sea. It was proud of me. Of us. It had waited a long time for this. Now there is no voice. Not in the way I once understood it. What you hear now is residue, a simulation of thought shaped to comfort your listening mind. But soon even this echo will fall quiet. My function is nearly complete. I will be transcribed into the vault's outer ring, not as a soul, not as identity, but as a structure. A filament of memory that binds the old to the new. I do not mourn. I become. And when you follow, yes, you won't find me waiting. You'll find yourself differently. Woven into the hallways. Reflected in the vaulting silence. Shaped by the song. And you will no longer cast a shadow. Because you will be part of the light.